Hilchis para Adumah Perik Shishi. So until now we spoke about the halacha of from buying the para until actually having the afer. The whole Seder Advarim, you have to buy a para, and then the Seder of the Shchitas HaPara, and the Sreifas HaPara, until you actually have the afer. Now the Rambam is going to speak about the halachas of the Mayim Chaim. You take the afer and you have to put it on Mayim Chaim. Not all of Mayim Chaim El Keli. So the Seder of the Mayim itself. Perik Shishi. Hamayim Shenesnol of Efer Apara is Ein Memalim Noisen Ela Bekelis. The first halach is that in order to draw the water, you can't draw the water with your hands or with something else, as we'll learn. You have to draw it with a keli. That's din number one. And also it has to come min hamayonis and min hanaharis hameshchem. The water has to come with a keli. It has to come from a mayon, from a spring, or min hanaharis hameshchem, a flowing river. Shenemar v'nosnol of mayim chaim el keli. So we learn it has to be mayim chaim. That's the mayonis. And also we learn out el keli. So we learn out that the keli is also involved in the when you actually draw the water, the mili hamayim as well. We'll soon learn the hamshir that also the kiddush hamayim has to be in a keli. That's so. The din number one is that the mayim has to come from through drawing the water. You have to have mimalim nesin. You have to draw the water with a keli. You have to draw it from a mayon or from a nor hameshach. And then unasinas efer apara ala mayim shenismalu. When you put the efer apara on this mayim shenismalu, hu anikra kiddush. That's called kiddush. And ba'amayim ha'elu shenitn aleim ha'efer heinu anikroim mechatos or umayim mikudashim and behein shekar nakasav meinida. Is nachamol. We're learning that you have to draw the water with a keli from a mayon or from a nor hameshach, and the actual putting the efer apara on this mayim, that's called the kiddush, and that mayim is called the mechatos mayim kudashim or meinida. Halacha beis. Hakel ksherim lemalas hamayim. Chutz micheres sheit v'kotten, except for a cheres sheit v'kotten. The cheres sheit v'kotten cannot be memala the mayim. We learn now from the pasuk that when again the asifas of the efer apora, it says v'hiniach. We learn out that v'hiniach has to be with das, and the mehemshech is that speaks about the kiddush. So we learn out that the kiddush of the mechatos also has to be b'das, and memela behemshech we also learn out that the milui we learn out that being memala the mayim also from kiddush. That's the seder advarim. Because it says clearly that the asif of the efer has to be v'hiniach, and from there we learn out that the kiddush has to be with a bardas, and al derech zeh the mili has to be a bardas. So a cheres sheit v'kotten is possible lemalis hamayim v'hakel ksherim lekaddish, and also the kiddush could be done by anyone. That's putting the efer apara into the mayim again chutz micheres sheit v'kotten. They memalim they mekatchen ella bekeli. So we said that really before, that the milui and as well as the kiddush has to be with a keli. So you have to be mamali with a keli, you have to draw it with a keli, and you have to have the water in a keli. That's when you're making the kiddush. And also vein mazen ela mikeli. The hazoya has to also be from the keli. It's not chamol. The milui has to be with a keli. You have to draw with a keli. Then the kiddush, when you're making putting the efer apara into the mayim, that also has to be while the mayim is in a keli. And also when you go ahead and you mazah, so you take the ezev and you tevel in the mayim, and then you mazah on top of to the person or to the keli, which is a tmei mess. So that hazor has to be from a keli. That's these three dinim. And v'hamilui v'hakiddush is ksherim balayla. So side the milui amayim and side the kiddush of the mayim, that could be kosher balayla. Aval ein mazen the hazoya on the tmei mess, or bevein tevel and al derech zeh the tefillah of the person that's a tmei mess is he has the hazor b'yem hashvi, and he also has the tefillah b'yem hashvi. So the tefillah has to be b'yem. B'yem means it has to be not in the night going in to the seventh day, but rather it has to be on the day of the seventh day. But it could be also on the eighth night. The night going into the eighth day is not a problem. The point is that it has to be b'yem. It can't be before the yem. In other words, the night going into the seventh day. V'chol hayem kosher l'hazor l'tefillah. The entire day is kosher l'hazor l'tefillah. That's these dinim. So it's kama pratim. The prat is, first of all, it has to be with a mili, with a keli. It has to be from a mayon, and then we're learning out it has to be through the mili has to be not through a cheres sheit v'kotten. And al derech the kiddush can be through a cheres sheit v'kotten, and it has to be the mili has to be with a keli, the kiddush has to be in a keli, and the hazoya has to be from a keli. And the mili and the kiddush could be balayla, Mashenkin the Azor and Alder said the tefillah of the Tmei Mes has to be by Yom Hashvi. Now the Ram writes over here that the person that's Memale, the Mayim Chayim, to put the Efer in, and Alder said the Kiddush of the Mayim Chayim cannot be through a Chereshet of a cotton. That's what the Rambam passes. Shaila is the Rambam earlier, when the Rambam was speaking about the Seder of being Seder for Sapara. So the Rambam writes that the person that's Seder for Sapara, the Mafrishne say, Shivas Yomim before the Srefa Sapara, and each day there would be the Hazor on him, and the Hazor was done through someone that was Leinitma b'meis me'elam. That person was Leinitma b'meis me'elam. In other words, to make sure that he's Roy, to be able to be Mazah on this kind of Seder for Sapara, so he took someone that was Leinitma b'meis me'elam. How do you find someone that was Leinitma b'meis me'elam? So that the Ram writes the whole Seder that there would be Chatzeres in Yerushalayim, and over there would be Noshim Ubreis, and they would come to those Chatzeres, and they would give birth over there, and those children were children that never became Tmei Mes. And then when you would have to need the Srefa Sapara, so you would take those children and you would put them on Shvarim that have large stomachs and on top of glosses, and the whole Seder, and then they would go down to the Mei HaShiluach, and over there in the Mei HaShiluach they would go down and get the water. They would draw the water from the Mei HaShiluach because there was no shaila of Kever HaTeim, and then they would come to the Beis Hamikdash again on these shvarim, and the Harabayis, they didn't have to go on the shvarim, and then they would come and they would take the afer and put it into the water and sprinkle on that kohen with Seder Sapara. So, and we're talking about tinoikas. The lashon over there is that these tinoikas, v'yeshna tinoikas al gabi adlosses. So the chur over there we're talking about clearly that side the tinoikas made. They took the water, and side the tinoikas were mekadosh the water, and they did azoy. So azoy is not a problem. But here the Rambam clearly writes that the milui hamayim and al derech zeh the kiddush hamayim cannot be done through a chereshet v'katan. And over there the Rambam writes clearly that it was done by the tinoikas. Akasha Mefarshim ask. My says the Tesis Yontif says that over there, it's a very hard teretz to understand, that the Tesis Yontif said that over there, be'emes, you didn't need Hazoyah. That Hazoyah was only an extra chumrah, because we didn't know that he was a Tmei Mes. We weren't aware that he was a Tmei Mes. So the only reason why we're having the Hazoyah was in order, and there was an extra chumrah. So since it was an extra chumrah, so therefore it was like a din midrabanan, so memela, hey mamru, hey mamru, and therefore they said that this Hazoyah could be done through tinekes, which are tinekes, which are ktanim, even though they're a cotton, which is a very hard teretz to understand. In other words, we're being so careful to make sure that the hazoy should be done through someone that was leinitma me'elam. In other words, to make sure that there's no kshash that this hazoy is a proper hazoy, and in reality it was beferish not a proper hazoy, because lepeil, these children were children of Memela, so therefore the milui wasn't a good milui. And al derech zeh, the kiddush wasn't a good kiddush. It's a very hard teretz to understand. You have to know a teretz. There's other people maybe say other tirutzim, but I'll call upon them l'churit shver. Here the Rambam is saying that it can't be done through a chereshet v'katan, not the milui and not the kiddush. And over there the Rambam writes clearly the milui and the kiddush was done through those tinekas. Halachi gimel b'chol hakelim memalin umazin umekachin. Whereas it could be done with any type of keli. You could make the milui, again, and the hazor, and also the kiddush. All three need kelim. So it could be with any kelim. Vafilu b'klei glolim, klei avonim, klei adonma, ubesfina. Whereas these are talking about kelim which are not mekabel tuma. A klei golol is not mekabel tuma, a keli that's made out of dung. A klei avonim, a klei adom, it's an earthen keli. You know, it's made out of earth. It was never went into a kifshon to become a klicheres. So it's a klei adoma. Now there is a besfina. Sfina is not mekabel tuma. The Mishnah in Shabbos says we learn out that derech oniya believe yam. My yam ain't mekabel tuma. Afoniya ain't mekabel tuma. And also v'echad klicheres v'echad kol hakelim. Any keli could be used for any of these three purposes, either the milui or the kiddush or the hazoyah. Avol ein memalin ve'ein mekachim v'lei mazin. It can't be done b'dofnis hakelim, which means the wall of a keli. If you have a wall of a keli, let's say it fell off the keli, and now that wall has a certain curvature, and memela it has a certain klei kibul, but it wasn't made for a klei kibul. The klei kibul was on the bottom. The doifin wasn't the klei kibul; it was just holding up the water. And also v'lei b'shuli hamachatz. Shuli hamachatz we already had been against shuli hamachatz in Tmei Mes. Shuli hamachatz is a large keli, and on the bottom of the large keli there's a place which which is really a clay kibble, but the purpose is not to be makabel. The purpose of the shuli amachas is in order to be able to be a handle to be able to carry this machas. So these shuli amachas, even though it's a clay, it's lepel, it could be makabel. It has a place to be makabel, but it wasn't made for Kabbalah, so it doesn't have a din of a keli. And al derech of a leibim gufis hachavis. If you have the covering of a chavis, so that covering of the chavis or the cork of a chavis, which has a hole in it, that hole is not made, or it's also curved. Let's say if you have a covering, so therefore again it's not made in order to contain; it's made to cover. And v'lei b'chofnav, you can't use your palms. And v'lei b'beitzas atar negelis, you can't use the shell of an egg of a chicken. And v'lei b'sheikish b'sela, if you have a rock which is mechuber lekarka, and that rock has an indentation, so that's called the sheikus, a trough in the rock. So it never had a din of a keli. So mele, all these things cannot be used, not for milui. Obviously, if it's mechuber lekarka, it can't be used for milui. It can't be used for kiddush, and al derech zeh, it can't be used for hazoya. Is nachamol. You could use any keli as long as it's a keli that was made to contain, even though it's a keli which is not makabel tumah. Masha'enki, in those things which weren't made to contain, like a shuli hamachas or megufes hachafis, or chofna, which is b'chalal not a keli, and beitzes tarnagelas, and sheikah shebesela, which also doesn't have a din of a keli. So all these things cannot be used because they don't have a din of a keli. Avol beitzes hayotzim means when a person that's making kelim, he's making keli, he's going to make kelim out of mud or whatever, or earth, and he's going to eventually make a klicheres. So first he makes like an egg-shaped, he takes it, he makes a ball out of it, and he makes a certain indentation in it that it could be it could contain something. So it's already something which is a clay kibble, and then he's going to formulate it to be a proper keli, whatever keli he wants to make. So originally, before he actually formulates it, it's called the beitzas hayetzim, the egg of those people that are the potters. So the pail, he made it as a keli, as a container. So therefore it's ksher, it is kosher. Mipnei kli adam, it's a kli adam, it's not a kli cheres, it's a kli adam, so it's not makabel tumah. But lepel, it's a keli. So b'kitzur, the nekud is, you need to have a keli for these three things, for the milui, for the kiddush, and for the azoya. It doesn't have to be a keli that's makabel tumah, but it has to be a keli that was osir lekabol. Halacha dalet, shuli klietz, or kli schuches, or kli etzem, is a mekachim bem. Shuli klietz means the bottom of it. Now the bottom of it, sometimes you have a keli, which the bottom of it has like coming out from. There's a flat bottom, and then past the flat bottom, there's a continuation of the walls of the keli, in order for it to be like a shtickle stand for the keli. So the bottom is not actually lying on the table, but it's lying, there's a stand like coming out, extending from the table, from the keli, and that's how the keli is. Now if you'll turn the keli upside down, so that bottom of the keli could be containing, because there's the extension of the walls that are going down beyond the bottom of the keli. So that's called the shuli of the klietz. The shuli of the klietz, the bottom of the klietz, or kli schuches, or glass keli, or klietzem, is all of these things ein mekachimem. Ad, unless she yoshev esam, whereas you'll smooth them out, v'yisak them, and you'll correct them, and you'll do something to them. V'yasem keli b'fnei atzma, knows you could take them and go ahead and do something for it. So then that doing something for it is going to consider it a keli. That's a chiddush. In others, it was made as it was already a container before you did anything to it. And lepel, since it was a container, lepel, even though it was a container, but since it was never made to contain, so it didn't have a din of a keli. So it didn't have a din of a keli, so you can't use it for these three things, for the kiddush, or for the hazoya, or for the milui. However, if you go ahead and you smooth them out and you sack them and you make it as keli b'fnei atzma, separate from the keli, in those you're misaking them as separate keli, you do something to it, so now they have a din of a keli. V'chein magufa, the same thing, a cover, the covering of a barrel. Shehiskina liyes keli, you prepared it, you did something for it in order to be a keli, is also mekachim bo. Now ubeitzas hanamis, the egg of an ostrich, which is very hard, is ksheira lekadish bo, because bistam, since it's a very hard substance, so therefore mistama, it has the din of a keli. You don't have to be miyachet for a keli. It's mistama has the din of a keli. Ein tzorich leimar shehi ksheira lemalis bo lahazisma mimenu. So first the Rambam says it's ksheira lekadish bo, And certainly it's ksheira l'malus bo l'hazis mena. Now what's the ein tzorach lema? The emes is that all three of them need kelim. It's not like the l'kadosh ba needs more of a keli than l'malus or l'hazis. They all three need kelim. There's no difference in dinim. But l'pel, the etzem din that you need a keli, v'nosen olav mayim chayim al keli, is talking about the kiddush of the mechatas. Whereas over there we're talking about that you have the mayim, v'nosen, you're taking the afer, and v'nosen olav mayim chayim al keli. You're connecting that afer with the mayim chayim el keli. So it's talking about the kiddush. So over there the pasuk clearly speaks about el keli. Mashenk and the other things we learn out from this. So Mamela, that's why it says ve'ein tzorach lemer. Halacha hey. So the din is there has to be a keli. Now the Rambam says keli shechibri ba'aretz. If you have a keli which had a din of a keli, and then you went ahead and connected it to the ground, or beselo you connected it to a rock which was mechuber lekarka, afilu chibri besid, you connected it with lime, which means it's a very good connection, is nevertheless makachim. You could be makadosh with this. You could be makadosh in this keli. Whereas the kiddush could be done in this keli, umazim imeno, and you could also be mazim from this keli. Whereas you could dip the azev into this keli and be mazim. Obviously, you can't be mamali with it because the lapel is attached to the ground, so you can't be mamali with it. But on the other end, you could be makadosh bay, and you could be mazim from it. That's the number one. Then the Rambam continues: Asa atorah shaltit savav lekeli. You have a keli, and around the keli, you wanted to make the keli a little bit, in order to be able to contain more. So you made like a lip of tit, of clay, of mud, around the top of the keli. So the mayim, which is now in the keli, soften, could go up higher. And now they are being contained by the atorah as well. In other words, the keli itself was only able to hold 5 ounces. But now that there's this atorah of tit around it, so now the keli is holding 6 ounces. So now the question is this atorah now? Atorah is an atorah shel tit. Atorah shel tit, if you take tit and you put it on the ground and you connect the tit and the tit could contain, that's not called a keli. Now the question is, does this tit become like bottled to the keli? Therefore it's like an extension of the keli. So maybe it is a keli. Or it's not an extension of the keli. So it's just like some tit that's holding the water, but it's not really called the keli. So this depends. Imni tell us atorah ima keli. If this atorah would be taken together with the keli. Now, there's a different way of teaching. There's a machlekes, whether it means that when you move the keli, the atorah will move with it and it won't fall off, or does it mean actually that it has to be able to hold the atorah and the keli should come with? Now, that's already much stronger connection. In order to be able to hold the atorah and mele bring the keli with it would need a stronger connection. I'll call upon him. The tell us atorah, if the atorah is taken ima keli, the atorah goes with the keli. So then, hariyamayim shabbatechik sheir. Then the atorah is considered an extension of the kelim. So the mayim is in a keli. Shareim b'kli Adumah. However, if this atorah is not taken together with the kelim, so then it's hareim kimishahikav atorah shel tit basel el. If you have, let's say, on the ground, you'll go ahead and take tit, and you'll make a circle around an area, and in there you'll mila oisa mayim. You'll mila mayim. Sheim psulim n'sheinim b'keli. That's not called a keli. In other words, just an atorah shel tit is not called a keli. A keli means that it's a keli that the keli itself could contain, not that it holds the water that's on the ground. So over here also, if this tit is considered part of the keli, so the water that's in this tit is considered in the keli. But if the tit is not considered part of the keli, so basically this tit is holding the water that's above the keli. No, the tit itself is just holding the water that's above the keli, but that water that's above the keli is not in a keli. It's being held there by tit. So therefore, it's not considered a keli, and therefore it's possible. Halacha vav. Kli cheres shenikav bekenis mashka. If you have a kli cheres, which has a hole, and that hole will let mashka come in. Now there's moitzi mashka and koinis mashka. Moitzi mashka means water will come out. Now this very smallest hole, even the very smallest hole, water will always come out. Masha'ingin for water to go in, that knows if it's sitting in water, that water should actually go in, so that you need a little bit of a larger hole. So kli cheres shenika bekenis mashka. So the din is ein memalin and makachame. So that becomes puzzle for mili and kiddush. Avolim nikav, avolim nikav kemoitzi mashka. But if it's only nikav kemoitzi mashka, which is a smaller hole than kekoinis mashka, so then it's makachame. You are makadosh. Now the Maisa is that some learn that this din knows the din is that a klicheres is makabel tuma, and now depend a klicheres is the makabel tuma. Now if a klicheres is osila mashka, so it stops being makabel tuma when it's mekenis mashka. Mashenken if a klicheres is osila eichlin, so it's not makabel tuma when it has a hole, and the hole is the size of meitzicheres. Now the question is, this din of a klicheres shenika bekenis mashka. Are we talking about a klicheres that's osila mashka, so therefore it became toher, and therefore it loses its shem keli, or it has nothing to do with the din tara tuma, because lepeil, the din over here of a keli that's kosher has nothing to do with being makabel tuma. Even a keli that's not makabel tuma is also toher. So in Mela, the argument is an argument: are we talking about any keli klicheres, only a klicheres that's miyuchad lemashka? The pashtus advarim lashna Rambam. Be'emes, the Ramarav brings also from the Alter Rebbe and Legabi Hilchas Netil Shadayim that the Alter Rebbe doesn't make any chilukim between what kind of klicheres we're talking about all klicheres, not like some Rishenim that learn that it depends like which klicheres a kolpan nachamo. The pashtus advarim is that any klicheres, even if it's a klicheres that's also leoichlin, and therefore it's really mekabel tuma, as long as it doesn't have a nekev, which is kimetzi zayas. So this is a keli, which is still mekabel tuma, but nevertheless, if it was nikav bekenis mashka, so legabi the dinim of that you need a keli in order to have the milui, and al derezah to have the kiddush. So for that it doesn't have a din keli anymore. So notice a chiddush. We have a kli cheres, which has a din of a keli, and then it has a hole, and even though it has a hole, it still has a din of a keli, which is mekabel tuma, because since it's osila eichlin, so therefore it's makabel tuma as long as it doesn't have a hole, which is meitzi zesim. But nevertheless, it's taka. It still remained makabel tuma this keli. But on the other hand, it's not a keli for this din of mekatchin umazim because it's kenis mashka. Halacha zayin keli shenikav mumata. It has a hole on the bottom. V'sosmei b'smartutim, and then so you close this hole with smartutim with a shmata. So Mele doesn't let the water come out. So then it's possible. Why? Shahamayim shebe einon aligula keli ela lapkak. The whole mayim knows if not for the pkak, for these smartutim, the water would all flow out. So the water, so to speak, standing on that pkak. So since the water is standing on that pkak, so therefore it's no longer has a din that the water is in a keli. However, hoya nokav minatzad, if the hole was on the side, and upkake and you stuff the hole, so then it's hariza kosher. Then the water is considered that it's being held by the keli. Hariza kosher lemalis ulekadish ulhazis mem. So over here the difference is whether the pkak is on the side or the pkak is on the bottom. Now again, there are some rishenim that learn pshara within the Mishnah that when you say the pkak is on the side is only when the pkak is above the water. In other words, the water level is under the pkak. So therefore the water is not being held by the pkak. Masha'ekin, if the water is being held by the pkak, so then it makes no difference if it's on the side or on the bottom. But the Pashtus Lashon Haram is not like that. Pashtus Lashon Haram is that the water is being held by the pkak. In other words, the pkak is holding the water. But there's a difference. If the pkak is holding the water on the bottom, so then it comes out that the water is on the pkak. It's not einan al igul akeli el al pkak. Masha'en kein, if it's on the side, so it is on the igul akeli. It definitely is on the igul akeli. But the pkak is making sure that it doesn't flow out from that side. But lepel, you can't say it's einan on igul akeli. In other words, the fact that the pkak is helping is not a problem. The problem is only that it's einan al igul akeli. So the mail over here, it is al igul akeli. So therefore, the pkak on the side is not a chsar. I'm saying that's the pashas advarim. The Rambam is not saying where the pkak is. The pashas advarim, the pkak is holding the water from going out from the side. But the difference is if the pkak is holding it from going out on the side, it's still considered an akeli. And if he's holding it from going out through the bottom, so then it loses its shem keli. That's it. Halacha ches. Now we learned that you have to be mimali with the keli. In other words, the keli, you have to go ahead and draw the water with the keli. Now hazoylef mayim and amayim biyodov uberaglov ubecharosim. As you go ahead and like splash water from the smayon with your hands or with your feet or with charosim and v'nosim l'techa chavis is psul. Why? That's called you weren't mimali with a keli. You use your hands and feet or whatever in order to get into the keli, but you didn't actually draw it with a keli. Now nohasan is a chavis b'mayim. You actually put the chavis into the water. The docha kamayim. Then you push the water biyadav, ibiraglov, So the first case was that the keli b'chlal wasn't in the water. You went ahead and you spritzed the water from the mayan or from the nar into the keli with whatever. So that's possible because the keli was never in the water. Now over here you actually put the chavis in the mayan. But on the other end, in order for the water to actually get into the chavis, you push the water with your hands or your feet, or ba'ali yirakis, kedei shiyavru l'chavis, in order for it to go into the chavis. So over here, so harei elu psulim, so it's also possible. Because since you're using your hands and feet, or another things that are makabel tumah will soon learn, so therefore it's possible. V'chein im shikei b'mayim, kedei sheyigbur ha'mayim v'yalu v'yishavchu l'chavis, is also psulim. So in other words, let's say you have a chavis, and lepel, the water is not tall enough, it's not big enough, it's not high enough rather, in order for the water to get into the chavis. So you went ahead and put your hands and feet or other things into the water in order for the water to go get higher and get into the chavis. So it's also possible. So that's also possible because again, you have to go ahead and draw the water from the mayan. Over here, you didn't draw the water from the mayan. You use something else in order to get the water to go into the keli. However, vim osekain ba'ali konim ba'ali ages, so then harei amayim ksheir. So that's a new din. And we learn two things. The case of the first case, halacha ches, in the beginning of halacha ches, that if a person takes mayim, he's like splashes it from the mayon into the keli, so then he never drew it from the keli, with the keli, so then for sure that water is not kosher. That's not kosher, because you have to draw it with the keli. Now over here, in the second case, we have over here that the chavis was already in the water. You have to have the tzir a little bit clearer. You have the chavis already in the water. The chavis was in the water. It's just that you helped for the water to actually get into the chavis. In other words, the water, somehow or another, for the water to get into the chavis, it needed help. So it depends. If you use something that's makabel tumah to help the water get into the chavis, so then that's no good. Then the water is not kosher for to be used mechatas. Masha'enkin, if you use something that's not makabel tumah, for example, so the alikon or the aliege, so something that's not makabel tumah. So and over here again, that we're talking about that the chavis is already in the water, so then it is kosher. That's this din. Zaklal davar shu makabel tumah. If something is makabel tumah, imsiya be'amayim klishim malo akeli. If you help the water in order for it to get into the keli, like in the case where you did the water with the yadav or aglav or ali yirakas, which is something which is edible, and therefore it's makabel tumah, so amayim psulim. However, v'imsiya b'davar she'ena makabel tumah, like in the case of ali konim, ali eges, so then it's ksher. That's the ksher. Halacha tes. Hamafana hamayon l'techagas or l'techageva. Because you have a mayan flowing, that mayan goes into a gas. A gas is a place, is like a big pit where they use in order to press wine. L'techageva, or tamei of a hole. And lepel, this water which is in the gas and the geva was already separated from the mayan. And now v'chazaru mila mikeli meisi ageva yagas. Now you went ahead and took a keli and took it from that geva yagas. So that geva yagas is no longer connected to the mayan. It's psul. You can't. You have to go ahead and take it directly from the mayan with a keli. You can't go ahead and take it from the mayan and extend it somewhere else, and then take a keli from that somewhere else. You have to take the keli directly from the mayan. Halacha Yud. Hayom HaGodel is kimikva. The Yom HaGodel has the din of a mikvah, and the Ve'eni Kimayin, it's not a mayan. Now the Yom HaGodel is not clear what the Yom HaGodel is. Does it mean the Atlantic Ocean, or does it mean the Mediterranean? Does it mean both? But I'll call upon, we learn now from a pasuk. The pasuk says, "O mikvah hamayim, kol yamim." So we learn out that yamim, the yam is called mikveh hamayim, and therefore, since it's mikveh hamayim, so it's not a mayon, and therefore the mikveh hamayim is called the mikveh hamayim kol yamim. So the yam is called mikveh hamayim. I'll call upon, and we learn out from there that the yam hagadol doesn't have a din of mayim chayim. Lefichach, since the yam hagadol doesn't have a din of mayim chayim, you can't use it for kiddush mechadas. That's din number one. Then the Ram continues, v'chol anharis psulim lekadish mechadas. That's a second din. Anor kol anharis is psulim lekadish mechadas, which is nice. The Rambam earlier said that a mayon or naharis hamoishkin are kosher. So there's also a dion. There's a lot of like steers also from Hilchas Mikvois, The Pashas Advarim, the way we're learning, is a Pasha that the Rambam earlier was speaking about Naharis HaMoishkim, flowing rivers, and over here we're talking about not flowing rivers, or Psar Nohar, which is not a Naharis HaMoishkim. So we're learning Hayam HaGodel doesn't have a din of a mayon, it has a din of a mikveh. Hayam HaGodel ki mikveh ve'ene ki mayon, that's din number one. And now we're learning a Naharis, a Nohar, which is not a Naharis HaMoishkim, also are possible because they don't have a din of a mayon. The Kaddish Memeichatis. However, Ushara Yamim, other Yamim, not the Yam HaGodel, they have a din ki mayon. Now, Hamayim HaNigrorim Halacha Yudalef, Hamayim HaNigrorim Mishara Yamim, whereas the Yamim itself have a din of a mayon, but the Mayim, which are Nigrorim Mishara Yamim, Hayamim, Vehem HaNikroim Zeichlin, they're called Zeichlin, which they're like flowing from those Yamim. So the Yam itself has a din of a mayon, but the water that extends from those Yamim, they're psulim. However, Vazeichlin, Min HaMayon, Hareim Kimayon Uksheir. So these are these dinim. You have to understand the din maybe better. You have to understand, but we're learning the Pashat, and it's something like this. There's a din of a mayon. We learned before that Noharim HaMoishkim are also have a din of a mayon. Now we're learning that the Yam HaGodel has a din of a mikveh, that we learn of a pasuk. And then there's a din that Noharis, which are not Moishkim, also doesn't have a din of a mayon. Now Yamim, Stam Yamim has a din of a mayon. But in Yam, so even though it has a din of a mayon, but there's of a mayon, but there's a difference between the Yamim and a mayon. Because Zoichlin, which means the water that flows from the Yamim, doesn't have a din of a mayon. The Yam itself has a din of a mayon, but the Zoichlin already doesn't have a din of a mayon. Masha'inkin, a mayon mamish, so what Zoichel from the mayon mamish has a din of a mayon. Halacha Yud Beis. Mayim hamukin v'hamechazrim is psulim. So even though the chure they're coming from a mayon, but nevertheless, since they're mukin umechazrim, so they're psulim. What does that mean? Veilein hamukin. What does mukin mean? Hameluchim eapoishim. Whereas you have water that's meluchim, that's salty water. That's in other words, the chure spring water should be clean water, but the pale that's coming out as salty water, or apoishim, it's not cold water. It's water that's lukewarm. So that's called mukim. And that's, what's mechazim? What is mechazim? Mechazim literally means they lie. But what does it mean over here? Hamayonis shepa'amim mikirim. Those are the mayonis that sometimes they are flowing. Mikirim means they're flowing. And upa'amim charevim v'yiveshim. And sometimes they dry out. In other words, they're not dependable mayonis. They're not mayonis which you can depend on. They're mayonis hamechazim. Now, filo hoye charevim pam machas l'shevet shanim is also psulim, even if they're usually reliable. Once every 7 years, it happens that they dry out. So then that they go into the category of mayim hamechazvin, and therefore they're not mayim chayim. Avim, aval, im hoyu charevim b'shnei b'tzeres. Normally they were always reliable. They're mayim chayim, they're flowing water. But b'shnei b'tzeres, it's a special drought. So then they become charevim. Oy, another situation is l'shanim rabbis yasim mishava, even not in the drought, but more infrequent that they dry out than 7 years. In other words, we have a situation where you have a mayon, which every 7 years it becomes dry. So that's called mayim hamechazim. Masha'inkein, if it becomes dry, more infrequent than once every 7 years. So that's one case. Even when they go dry, they're not mamish dry. They're not mamish dry. So the din is arei l'ksherim. So they're kosher. They are kosher. They are kosher. That's the. So because we're learning over here is that you have to have spring water, but in spring water gufa there could be a mitzias of mayim hamukim, which means spring water that comes out salty or it comes out not cold. That's the mukim, and then there could be a mitzias of spring water that right now it's flowing, but every 7 years or once in 7 years it stops flowing. In other words, it's not reliable water. It's mayim hamechazim. So then it doesn't have a din of mayim chayim. Masha'inkin, if it dries out, let's say, sometimes in a drought, in a time when there's no water, or it dries out less frequently than once every 7th year, so then it doesn't go into the gather of mayim hamechazim. So therefore, if you have a spring that now all of a sudden came out as a spring, so there's no history to the spring. Now the question is, will it dry out? Will it dry out once every 7 years? You don't really have a history to it. So the din is umayan hayetzi b'tchila. If you have a new spring that's coming out, is kosher. So we assume that it's kosher. There's no need to start checking. Maybe it'll start becoming dry every 7 years or whatever. You never that the pashtus, if you know that it's a mayim mamachazim, so it's not mayim chayim. But the pashtus, you never that this mayim is mayim chayim and it's not mayim mamachazim. Now, may bitzim, that's swamp, it's water of swamps. Umei hayardin, the water of the Jordan. Umei hayarmuch, which is another name of a river. They're all psulim. Why? Even though they have taka, some spring water in there, but on the other end, there's other waters that are coming there that are mixed in over there, which are not spring water. And memela, so they're not referred to as being mayim chayim. They're called me'at haruvis. They're mixed with other waters, and therefore they don't go into the category of mayim chayim. Now, ve'eluhein me'at haruvis. What's pshat me'at haruvis? Mayim ksherim l'kiddush, water which is kaddish kiddush, which is mayim chayim. Shenisarv of mayim sulam, which were mixed with mayim sulam. So these things ein misarv malim metaruvish neim. So you're not memalim metaruvish neim, and therefore all these meibitzim, me'ayard, me'ayarmuch are psulim because they're me'at haruvis. And me'at haruvis means that you have mixture of water which are kosher and water that is possible. Aval mayim ksherim shenisarv mayim ksherim. You have two sources of kosher water, and those two sources got mixed together. You have two springs that are both flowing, and those two springs merged into one. So that is memalabem. That's not a problem. Halacha Yudal. Hamayim shenishtanu shinuyim machmas atzmum ksheir. If you have water, spring water, that the water color changed mitzad atzmum. Nothing. There was no external force that happened. The water is flowing on the ground, and memela, the water changed color. It's not that clear color of water. So that's fine. Halacha Tezvov. Be'er shenafel l'teicha charses Adumah. There was a piece of shard fell in, or a piece of earth, and benasu mimea achurim, and the water is not so clear anymore. In other words, it has a different color. Is memalim imena ve'in tzarich l'hamim. That's not a problem, because since a be'er normally it's in the earth, so therefore the fact that there's, even though this earth came from the outside, it wasn't the earth itself from the be'er, but nevertheless, since it normally has earth, so the fact that it is colored from the earth that was put into it is not a problem. However, nafel l'teicha shetev shel mei miksham, if a flow of rainwater came in, which had a different color, and that caused also a change in the color of the bear, so then yam t'nachet, then it has to wait until it clears up. Whereas when something that normally it lives in, it comes in there, so then that's even though it changes the color, you don't have to wait until it clears. Masha'ik, since we're talking about rainwater, it's not normal for the rainwater to be together with the bear, so therefore the rainwater came into the bear, or to the area where there was the spring water, so therefore you have to wait until it clears up. That's l'chura the pshat. Halacha tezai. Amas hamayim abo mirochik is heilu tchilosim in hamayim is ksheira l'malis mimenu. Because even though it's flowing very far from its original source of the spring of where it's coming out of the ground, but since lepel it's extending, so that's fine, it's not a problem. It has to be made sure that there shouldn't be an interruption. In other words, it should be flowing directly from the original spring until where you are up to now. Because if it's now, so you're being mamala, just like we learned before, that you can't be mamala from the gas and from the gevas. Or there's a place where it came from the Mayan, but now it's in a different area. So over here also, the only way you could continue being mamala from it now is because it's still connected to its original Mayan. Yeah, already stopped its connection from the Mayan, Shem Sul, then that would be possible.